Thank you, Dana. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have so many joining us today. I'm Jamie Spencer, Kansas Department of Agriculture Feed Technical Specialist. And today we're going to talk a little bit about labeling of medicated animal feed and the importance of adequate labeling. When you hear medicated feed labeling, what do you think of? Fear, anxiety, nausea? Or do you feel like you're comfortable with medicated feed labeling? No matter your comfort level, I hope today will help you better understand medicated feed labeling. Labeling is the avenue which communication between the manufacturer and the consumer is relayed. The feed label provides information to the consumer for the intended species, the indication for use or why the animal is being medicated, nutritional information such as a guaranteed analysis, the medication used, the level of medication in the feed, directions for use, cautions, warnings, lot number identification, net weight, and who's responsible for the medicated animal feed. By following the label instructions, the consumer can safely and effectively feed the medicated feed. The label also helps protect the manufacturer or the guarantor by informing the consumer how to safely and effectively feed their animals. There are many resources available to consumers, industry, and regulators alike to assure that medicated feeds are properly labeled. The AFCO official publication, or OP, contains feed terms and ingredients, definitions, as well as guidance documents. The feed labeling guide also provides information for labeling animal feed. FDA also has information available to assist with the labeling of animal feed. The Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, more specifically Part 582 for grass ingredients or ingredients that are generally recognized as safe, and Part 558 for medications and their uses. Also, Bluebird labeling found at Animal Drugs at FDA.fda.gov is also a good place to find information on labeling. A link will be provided at the end of this presentation, so don't worry about scribbling this particular address down. The Feed Additive Compendium is another resource for looking at medications and their uses. The Feed Additive Compendium is only available online now and can be purchased. It is important to note that the compendium is not regulatory by nature and should not be used as the final say. However, it is a resource that is easy to navigate. When I talk about a label, I'm talking about a display of written, printed, or graphic matter upon or affixed to the container in which a commercial feed is distributed, or on the invoice or delivery slip with which a commercial feed is distributed. Labeling, on the other hand, is all labels and other written, printed, or graphic matter upon a commercial feed or any of its containers or wrapper accompanying such commercial feed or advertising. A label may tell the purchaser if the feed is a complete feed that is nutritionally adequate for an animal that is intended to be the sole ration and can maintain life and or promote production without any additional substance being consumed except water. Or if the feed is intended to be a supplement that may be used with another feed to improve the nutritive balance or performance of the total and intended to be one fed undiluted as a supplement to other feeds, two offered free choice with other parts of the ration separately available, or three further diluted and mixed to produce a complete feed. Most ruminant feeds that are manufactured in a feed mill would be considered supplements because the ruminants also consume hay or other forages for the remainder of their diets. Feed for monogastric animals is generally accepted as a complete feed unless it is intended to be a supplement, such as a mineral or vitamin supplement. Medicated feed labels are required to have these elements: a product name or a brand name if appropriate, a name of the medication used and concentration of that medication, the purpose statement, or indication for use, a guaranteed analysis, an ingredient statement, feeding or mixing directions, the guarantor, lot identification, and a quantity statement. All medicated feed shall have the word medicated directly following the product or brand name. Ideally, it should state whether it's a type B or a type C medicated feed. The medicated feed label must indicate the species and class or classes of animal it is intended for. It shall include a purpose statement or indication for use. Non-medicated feed would contain a purpose statement. Medicated feed would have an indication for use. In this example, for increased rate of weight gain in growing beef steers and heifers on pasture, stocker, feeder, and slaughter, or in a dry lot and replacement beef and dairy heifers, and if it is intended for use as a complete feed, a supplement, or premix that is intended for further manufacturing of animal feed. This is an example of what an indication for use may look like. For increased rate of weight gain in growing beef steers and heifers on pasture, stocker, feeder, and slaughter, or in a dry lot and replacement beef and dairy heifers. All ingredients must be approved for their intended use. Those approvals may be listed in different places. The AAFCO OP, FDA Food Additive Petition, or GRAS. Brand names are not allowed for use in the ingredient statement. Similarly, medications are to be listed by the generic name and not the brand name. For example, if Rumensin is used to manufacture feed, the drug name is Monensin. Collective terms may be used in livestock feed. Collective terms are a general classification of ingredients. Grain products may be corn, barley, wheat, rice, milo, while roughage products may include psyllium husk, apple pomace, or oat hulls. The collective terms allow the manufacturer to use any of the ingredients in that classification depending on availability or cost without having to make a change to the label. The feeding directions must be adequate for the average person with little to no knowledge or experience with feed to properly use the feed. The directions must be complete. This slide has some examples of feeding directions. Consult your nutritionist is not adequate feeding instruction. It is better to indicate how much feed should be fed to the intended animals. And it is best to indicate how much feed is to be fed to provide a certain level of medication to a specific species or class of animal. It is important to note in the feeding directions if the medicated feed should be ramped up versus starting out at a high level. In the case of a free choice medicated feed, the instructions may state to adjust the feed intake with non-medicated feed prior to introducing the medicated feed, as the animals may over or underconsume the medicated feed. This may be especially important with free choice vitamin and mineral medicated feeds, and feeds that may be completely different from the current feed. Free choice medicated feed should be adjusted to the proper consumption level prior to the addition of medication. Drastic changes to an animal's diet can upset the biome of the intestines and cause the animal to not feel well or to become sick. Medications are designed to be used at a specific level for a specific purpose. Medicated feed, unlike prescription drugs, can only be used how they are approved. There is no extra label use for medicated feed, except under some very specific conditions. Caution and warning statements may be required for some medicated feeds. A caution statement provides information for animal safety, such as do not allow horses or equine access to feeds containing Monensin, as Monensin may be harmful or fatal to horses. Warning statements provide information for human safety. withdraw feed 48 hours prior to slaughter would be an example. This slide are some examples of what caution and warning statements may look like on the label. Livestock feed that contains ruminant protein prohibited in ruminant feed must bear the caution statement, "Do not feed to cattle or other ruminants." Poultry and swine feeds may contain protein prohibited in ruminant feed, but must also have the caution statement. Ruminant feed or feed that may be fed to ruminants should not bear the caution statement, as they should not have any material prohibited in ruminant feed. Pet food that may contain material prohibited in ruminant feed does not need the caution statement, because most people could assume that pet food may contain ruminant protein products. Also, livestock producers would not buy expensive dog food to feed to their ruminant animals. The guarantor must be on the label to identify the party responsible for the feed. The guarantor may or may not be the manufacturer. In this instance, the label would state "manufactured by blank feeds," or the guarantor may be another entity that the feed is made for. In that case, the label may state "manufactured for blank feeds." This is an example of a guarantor on a feed label. It may say "manufactured by" or "manufactured for" a specific company. A quantity statement is required on all feed. The quantity statement should include standard and metric units. I would not lose too much sleep if only the standard units are listed. And a count is allowed for certain products such as pet treats. This is an example of a net weight statement. Notice the bag weight in avoirdupois and metric units, as well as bulk. By law, all feed, especially medicated feed, should have a lot identifier for traceability purposes. There is no specific outline of what or where the identifier may be, only that it is on the label or labeling in the case of bulk feed. When creating a label for medicated feed, I recommend using the Bluebird labels. Bluebird labels are required for each medication approved for use. The Bluebird label is an example of what the label should look like when completed. There are representative labels that should be used to create, modify, or review medicated labels. The Bluebird labels can be found by searching animal drugs at fda.fda.gov. Once on FDA's animal drug website, one can type in the drug you're looking for and click on the quick search. Then you sort through the approved uses and drug levels that match the feed you want to make. You can then compare your label to the Bluebird label and make any corrections needed prior to printing. In the example on the slide, the right label is part of the Bluebird label. At the top, you see what the medicated feed is for. On the label on the left is the brand or product name. Both have the word medicated along with other information, such as the feed contains monensin and is a type C feed, meaning that it can be fed directly to the intended animals. Both have indications for use. The one on the left does not have a complete indication for use like what's on the Bluebird label. Since the Bluebird label is for increased rate of weight gain and control of coccidiosis, both indications for use are used. Since the feed on the left is only intended for increased rate of weight gain, the guarantor chose to only use one indication for use. I would accept this label since it covers the indication for use that is appropriate for this feed. I believe that both indications for use on the label would also be acceptable. I will say that there are some who may not see it the same way I do and would require both to be on the label. It's important to note that if there are two indications for use, there must also be two separate and distinct feeding directions consistent with the appropriate indication for use. On the Bluebird label, you will see a range of 15 to 400 grams per ton of monensin. The actual label will not have a range. It would be specific to the feed. On the example on the left, I chose to use 40 grams per ton. This is the rest of the Bluebird label that has a chart for figuring out how much medicated feed would be consumed to meet the desired drug amount according to the level of drug in the feed. This would be appropriate for different feeding levels and drug concentrations. If there's only one level on the label, I would consider that sufficient as long as it falls within the approved range for that particular indication for use for that specific species. Customer formula feeds would be subject to the same rules as commercial feed except for the guaranteed analysis. An invoice for the ingredients used may be used in place of a guaranteed analysis. The labeling should still contain a name. In this case, the next slide has the customer's name, indication for use, drug used, drug level, the word medicated, and a lot code or invoice number for tracking purposes. The label and the invoice together should have the same information as a commercial feed label. In this instance, the feeding directions are placed on the invoice since the feed manufacturer uses software that allows for feeding directions to be printed on the invoice. Drugs for use in animal feed are placed into two categories. Category 1 drugs are drugs that require no withdrawal period at the lowest use level in each major species for which they are approved, or are approved for use only in minor species. Category 2 drugs are drugs that require a withdrawal period at the lowest use level for at least one major species for which they are approved or are regulated on a no residue basis or with a zero tolerance because of carcinogenic concern, regardless of whether a withdrawal period is required in any species. Let's look at medicated feed types. The pure drug is called a medicated article. It is not a feed. The type A medicated article can only be used to make another medicated article or a type B or a type C feed. The type B feed is intended solely for the manufacture of other medicated feeds, a type B or a type C. It contains a substantial quantity of nutrients, including vitamins and or minerals and or other nutritional ingredients in an amount not less than 25% of the weight. It is manufactured by diluting a type A medicated article or another type B medicated feed. The maximum concentration of animal drugs in a type B medicated feed is 200 times the highest continuous use level for category 1 drugs and 100 times the highest continuous use level for category 2 drugs. The term highest continuous use level means the highest dosage at which the drug is approved for continuous use, consisting of 14 days or more. Or if the drug is not approved for continuous use, it means the highest level used for disease prevention or control. If the drug is approved for multiple species at different use levels, the highest approved level of use would govern under this definition. The manufacture of a type B medicated feed from a category 2 type A medicated article requires a medicated feed mill license from FDA, application approval under 21 CFR 515.20. A type B medicated feed is required to be labeled the same as a type C medicated feed, except it would have mixing directions instead of feeding instructions because it cannot be fed directly to animals. It must be mixed with feed to make another type B or a type C feed. A type C feed is a feed that contains a medicated article. It could be mixed from a type A medicated article, a type B feed, or another type C feed. It could be fed as a complete feed, used as a top dress on an unmedicated or combination feed, or used free choice. For a medicated feed to be fed free choice, it must either use a published formula found in the CFRs or be manufactured at an FDA licensed medicated mill with an approved formula. Free choice medicated feeds contain one or more animal drugs and are generally placed where the animals may freely consume the feed at the intended rate. It is especially important that the composition and consumption rate of the feed are consistent with the approval. The rate determined during the approval process is the consumption rate at which the drug is safe and effective for the intended use and would not result in violative drug residues in human food. FDA licensed and unlicensed mills may use a published formula to manufacture free choice medicated feed. Only sponsors or FDA licensed firms with access to the proprietary formulations may manufacture free choice medicated feeds using proprietary formulations. All feeds containing a VFD drug must have the caution statement highlighted on the side, highlighted on the slide on the label. Use of feed containing this veterinary feed directive, VFD drug, in a manner other than as directed on the labeling or extra label use is not permitted. Medicated feeds may only be used for the species, production class, and indications of use approved. A medication may be used for a minor species for which there is no approval if suffering or death is imminent and no other treatment is available. In this case, a veterinarian could write a VFD for a minor species or a minor use in a major species if the veterinarian references the Compliance Policy Guide 615.115. The VFD would be written for the approved species. The labeling would be consistent with the approved species and use. An example of this would be a medicated feed for goats to control active infection of anaplasmosis. There is not an approved treatment for goats. Suffering or death may be imminent. The veterinarian could write the VFD for control of anaplasmosis in cattle, as cattle are the closest animal that an approved treatment is available for. The rate would be the same as for cattle, taking into account the weight difference between cattle and goats. It might read feed X ounces per head per day to provide 0.5 milligram per pound of body weight per day, similar to what would be in cattle. Pesticides, also known as pass-through larvicides, such as S-methoprene and clarifly, are regulated by the EPA. Medicated feeds are regulated by FDA. When a pass-through larvicide is used as a non-medicated feed, it is regulated by EPA. It is not considered a medicated feed. If an EPA registered pesticide is used in combination with an approved feed medication, then the larvicide and feed would be considered medicated feed and fall under the jurisdiction of FDA and the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Dairy and Feed Safety. Medicated feeds require adequate labeling to be safe and effective for their intended use. Utilize the tools and aids in the AFCO OP, AFCO Feed Labeling Guide, the Code of Federal Regulations, and the Bluebird labels when developing, reviewing, or changing medicated feed labels to minimize errors and to assure that medicated feed is adequately labeled. By working together, we can promote the safe use of medicated livestock feed. Thank you for your time and for listening. I hope this has been worth your time and that you have learned something that can help you with medicated feed labeling. Do we have any questions?
Where can we download the recording of your fine presentation, sir?
Good question. So This presentation will be available on the KDA website, which is www.agriculture.ks.gov, probably sometime next week.
Very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Jamie, we have a question in the chat. Um,
Okay.
do feeds containing only pass-through pesticides require registration as a feed or just as a pesticide?
So Kansas does not register livestock feed. So in the state of Kansas, they would not be required to register. Since they are a feed, I would guess that most states would require them that if the state registers, I guess, livestock feed, they would still be required to register since they are a feed. Um, but that would be there's probably a different state to state, but I would think that most of them would require registration.
Okay, great. In looking at the registration, I have a question from those that are participating. Excuse me. How do you provide a label for your bulk feed customers?
That's a good question. Bulk feed has been problematic to provide labeling for many years because the bulk bin may be located out in the middle of a section somewhere with no way to attach a label. So um, I kind of leave that up to the manufacturer to figure out a way. Some have emailed labels when they take them. Some have a tube or piece of plastic pipe or something that they can put the labeling in, or um, even a magnet to attach the label to the frame of the bin or whatever. But they are required to be delivered or to be available to the consumer.
Okay, great. Thanks. Another question that I have is, can you send the label from the medication when you're using with the feed?
That's yeah. So yes, so if you're using a medication to let's say either type A article or type B feed, you can take that label and send it with the feed, but it also requires that you have more information than that. So you would still need to have the level of the feed or the level of the medication in the feed, and make the feeding instructions appropriate to that particular feed. Since if it's a type B or type A article, it would just have like mixing instructions.
Great. Do any of our participants have any questions that they want to add to the chat? I have one more question that I have on my list for you, Jamie, and that'll give
Okay.
folks time with it. So, uh, if someone is toll milling a medicated feed for another labeler,
Mhm.
what labeling do they need to provide?
Well, that depends. So that would depend on the agreement between the toll miller and the person or the guarantor. So if it could be considered like a customer formula feed and just have the ingredients and an invoice go with that. And then the person that it's being manufactured for could put their own labels on the feed. Or the toll miller could put the label of their customer on each bag and send it to either them or their locations.
Well, great. Well, we appreciate everybody's time today. Jamie, there aren't any other questions in the chat. As Jamie stated, the recording of this will be on our website for you to share to others. Look for an email coming from KDA that has the link to the page with the recording and also a link to a short survey. And we really do appreciate everyone taking a time to evaluate our webinars and give us suggestions for future webinars, we know that 30 minutes is about the right amount of time to present and ask you guys to take your time away from the day. So again, thank you very much for logging on today. We appreciate it and look for an email with recording link and a survey. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you, everyone.
Thank you.